Thanks to the whole NAM2020 team for having us here. It's really a pleasure. Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you had a very interesting day already, and I hope that you also found our little contribution here interesting. And in light of the scheme of the whole day, Back to the Future, I thought a little bit about what is happening currently. Of course, we're all pretty much suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic. We all have our own, I think, personal stories of lockdowns and staying at home, different in every country. So I thought to think a little bit about what does that actually mean for us as an industry, but also specifically maybe for us as a classical network equipment provider. And what do I believe do we need to change to networks? What could we learn out of that? And what could we do with that? So I put something together around those lines. Before I jump into that, let me quickly, get to a very short overview on ADVA. I believe, hopefully, our Italian team has done a good job of introducing our company to all of you. So hopefully you know us all. In case you don't, we're about 1,900 people with around 500 million revenue. And what we do is we provide solutions for cloud interconnect, which is basically optical connectivity from access metro to core, cloud access, which could be business services, mobile backhaul, or demarcation between different carriers for wholesale services, and synchronization solutions. So that's on a very high level what we do, but honestly, I didn't want to make too much advertisement here. I more want to give you some provocative thoughts and so on. Before I do that, let me say happy birthday to NAM2020. I mean, it's 25 years of NAM2020, which is quite an achievement. I think a very positive journey, all these 25 years. ADVA actually was founded 1 year earlier, so we're 26 years. We're like your big brother, if you want to say so, NAM2020. But also this year is a special year for us. So we do multiple presentations, people from my team, but also others, of course, the whole industry, because it's 50 years of optical communications. So important stuff like the laser or even low loss fibers were invented around about 1970, and 2020 was declared as the year where all of this has been around since 50 years. And I think another very tremendous story, I won't go into these details I put down here, but we came a very long way in optical communications. But once again, it's one birthday, but the big birthday is hopefully NAM2020's birthday. With that aside, let us get a little bit into what I actually want to talk about. I mean, we all know what happened to all of us personally due to the COVID pandemic, but I want to think a little bit about, if I look around, if I look at all the analyst stuff, anything you can read in the media regarding our industry, how would I put that all together? And of course, starting from the top, I mean, this is what we're doing here. We're having a virtual conference. We're all used to remote working now. If I look at ADVA, I told you we have 1,900 employees. Out of those, probably around 80% are working from home currently. We also believe, you will see that later, it won't just go away. Even if the virus would go away, it will stay like that. Of course, there are other things like remote education, telemedicine, all that stuff. Then I don't know if you do the same in Italy, but we do that in Germany. Our COVID app just came out. Due to data protection reasons, they are not allowing basically GPS access to the devices and data keeping, central data keeping. So it just uses smartphones with Bluetooth and so on, but people are heavily discussing actually we should take a full movement profile of people and warn others in case they come near to something or have test strategies and so on around it. So interesting concepts, but looking to telecom, what we all have seen, the traffic really exploded. I mean, I guess, I don't know what each of you really have experienced at home, but mine personal one was very interesting. Actually works nicely now, but didn't always in the beginning, but now it works nicely. But if I try to put together all the different inputs I saw from different medias and different analysts, it's round about a 30% internet traffic increase or more. Some say even 50%. I didn't look up the specific NAM2020 figures, but I'm sure you saw them today in some of the presentations. And then we see web traffic being up 20%, gaming up, VPNs up, video up 20%, and so on and so on. Down to collaboration up 25%. Also, we as ADVA just move to a bigger introduction of collaboration tools, not just for R&D, also in general. Of course, they are needed these days. So far, so good. But then, if you look at the revenue side of things, then you see many, especially of the tier 1 service providers, having the revenues down. Now, why is that? Because the revenues are not necessarily directly linked to the traffic. You see things like advertisements obviously being down. If you look at the US with about, I saw the latest figure was about 18 or 19% unemployment. Of course, advertisement goes down with lots of companies having problems, roaming charges basically vanishing, maybe IT spend going down, maybe things like SME access being very slow at least, if not down. So all of this leading for some of them to, yeah, I need to do more, I need to build more, but at the same time, I need to cut cost. Not an easy one. And then talking to some of our customers, but also looking at the media, many people spend a big chunk of their 2020 budget already. I talked to one major German telecommunication CTO yesterday, who basically said all of our budget of 2020 is spent. When asking, and so do you get more for the rest of the year? Well, don't know. So we'll see. Now, this is obviously a difficult situation. Do more with less somehow and actually accelerate it. Now, if I go one level down, if I look at companies like us, really connectivity providers, I think what we saw initially was a supply chain problem. Of course, lots of component shortages. You all know about Wuhan. What you probably don't know, Wuhan is one of the hearts of optical components. About 80% of optical isolators come out of Wuhan, no matter which vendor. And so we all had some issues, supply issues, and then you had things like we still have closures of Southeast Asia factories. We maybe missed some very simple stuff like resistors or capacitors or things like that. So it's very difficult to get the supply chain together, but we're getting through this. And if I talk about ADVA, I think we're very good in supplying all these components and solutions customers are asking us for, and we somehow get used to running after each simple thing and use this, if you want to say so, new normal to deliver stuff. So we somehow get over this supply chain problem slowly. So I think what we will see next, we might run into a demand side challenge. I just said many of the budget might be already spent. If I look at what analysts say, like here is Signal AI, they basically say, okay, fine, we saw it being up in Q1 and Q2. This is actually for North American EMEA. You see it split by different services, but we think it's going to be down in Q4. And I think we see that starting. You see enterprise being pretty much down. We also see that on the smaller SME solution or enterprise or business customer solutions, it is slowing down, obviously, with a recession coming along in many parts of the world. So far, we're still pretty stable on the connectivity side, but we see where that goes. So we're expecting some demand side challenges. Now, interesting question is, where do we go from here? Many people talk about a new normal. If I look at enterprises, take us as an example, of course we learned, like I put down here, networking is essential. Some politicians in Germany told me it is system relevant. So that's good to hear for all of us. So it's essential. We're working with a distributed flexible workforce. We're pretty distributed over different, let's say, continent and countries anyhow. And now with 80% being home, even more so. And we're getting used to that. Of course, we need to get the right stuff around there, processes, tools to develop products in such an environment. We need to interact with customers like yourselves or suppliers virtually, maybe introduce products virtually, and obviously we have a lot of pressure on supply. So what we will do, or what we're doing already, is we're going to speed up digitization, get more tools in. We think it will stay like this. We think we will keep 25 to 50% of the people in home office in a very flexible way, no matter what happens to the virus and whether some cure is around or not, and just get used to it and try to learn from it how we best develop stuff, best develop product, which actually works surprisingly well. On parts like software development, actually better, with less faults and faster than it was before. So it's surprisingly well. Of course, we all miss some human interaction. And then there's a lot of pressure to localize production, to get more business continuity in, and even local pressure from politicians saying there must be more coming out of certain countries or Europe. say that, and get less dependent on supply chain. So we will see that. If I think about our customers as service providers, of course, you need to ensure network and service connectivity. You need to somehow get the networks to a level that they can cope with this additional demand, which might not quickly go away again. Also here, I believe it won't just vanish and be all the same as it was before. But the big one, for many of them, not for all of you, I hope, is you need to somehow get aligned with the revenue you get with your spend. Of course, I said it before, do more faster with less. So the one thought I would like to provoke here is this the time that we start to charge for bits or throughput? So we start a metering as opposed to a bundling of some services with some flat rates and some other stuff and so on. Because if we would have done that for many of those examples I've seen, then revenue would have scaled with what we need to do. But we don't, at least in many cases. So of course we need to spend less money. So we probably need to accelerate the digitization, disaggregation, all this stuff of networks also. And as we need to do things very fast, I think it's a time to team up, to stack up services, to team up between different carriers. And that's why I'm saying, I think this is a time for very simple wholesale services, maybe even metered wholesale services. So that's my thought I'm somehow having. And from here, I would like to go a little bit more into detail. What do I mean when I say simple wholesale services and how can they look like? So first of all, before we do that, you all heard about disaggregation. You heard about this aggregation being pushed by the likes of tip communities, driven by Facebook and so on, pretty much on the blue parts of this chart. So down to network equipment vendors, somehow to split up their solutions, to make it more open, to standardize it, to virtualize it, to make it less box and less vendor dependent. So that can be in a vertical way, like shown here, or it can be in a horizontal way. What I added, I think the same needs to be done for services. We somehow need to disaggregate services. There's an ugly word for it. People don't like what happened years ago, depending on which company you're with. It was called unbundling. The new word would be disaggregation. So you can do that the same. Horizontally, many of you do that already. Horizontally, i.e. you're having regions, you're having access core, different network areas and so on, and you somehow partition them. But you can also do that vertically and unbundle applications from connectivity. And the second piece is we need to accelerate digitization, just like the enterprises do. So this should be an overview of what do I mean when I say network digitization or service digitization. Okay, I need to be programmable with all the stuff I put here on the left side, maybe down to using white boxes with open source, having telemetry around it and so on, but somehow have programmable solutions. Then maybe we want to do some closed loop automation. Simple stuff would be zero-touch provisioning, but of course we want as little human intervention as possible. And maybe we're even applying some more modern schemes, like let's just stay with machine learning, don't even call it AI, in order to minimize human intervention. I would call that even add intelligence to it on top of automation. But I think that's something we learned from all of what we've been through in the last, whatever, around about 3-4 months. We need to accelerate, not just talk about, but really do. Now, let us look at some opportunities which then result in these simple wholesale services. For example, IoT. I think there's a huge opportunity in IoT, whether that is using fibers on a very low level. You see me showing pictures here which have from the left side to the right side, basically the device edge, and then over the access network edge going to the core. And if I look at red pieces, I think this will be enterprises doing themselves. So doing some IoT gateway, maybe in the manufacturing side with LoRa or Sigfox, stuff like that, or having utilities with SCADA and this stuff. Probably people do that on themselves. If it's blue pieces, I think this can be done by service providers, ISPs, or mobile providers, bigger guys, even down to providing IoT gateways, and then basically backhauling the whole thing into the core via stuff like Amazon Greengrass or Microsoft Azure. You get the slides, so I won't go through all these figures, but I just try to put down, if I look at different applications, what are the key network properties I need for different of these very prominent or hotly discussed IoT applications. So probably things like a connected car or V2V vehicle communications. But you see, Bandwidth, latency, would I need some edge compute in the network? Would I benefit from that? How important is synchronization or security? And what are availability figures being discussed, with some outrageous ones, like for industry automation, because you don't want to kill people with robots, or for some other ones, which are, we as network people know, very hard to achieve. Again, you get these figures, so I don't want to really go through all of them. The next opportunity, definitely the enterprise opportunity. This can be done quickly. So where is it in connectivity? You either connect data centers, or you connect hybridly to clouds, to multi-clouds, public clouds. We might go into wireless convergence, enterprise LTE, things like that, all opportunities for service providers, or just branch office access, things like SD-WAN, universal CPE, and again, maybe some IT OT conversions. This is where, again, IoT doesn't fit that much, but things are getting together. You see the properties again on the upper part. And then the big one is the mobile opportunity. And this is, of course, a hot topic with 5G being around the corner, or about already starting to be installed. I think this is the time to accelerate multiple aspects in mobile networks. It's a complicated picture, but I guess the big ones are, we need to centralize some pieces in order to have efficient networks, often referred to as CRAN. We need to virtualize solutions, maybe disaggregate. Prominent one is the ORAN, also run in the tip, and also distribute some other pieces from the core. But you see, this is basically disaggregation, virtualization, digitization, if you want to say so, at its best. Also here, I put down the key parameters again: bandwidth, latency. Do we need some edge compute? Could we do something there? Sync, security, availability, and of course, automation, zero touch provisioning. Now, looking at these services, taking a whole step back for all of this. So what is it you can actually rent or offer as a simple service? Of course, from the bottom, footprint premises, connectivity services. You can go up. You can provide synchronization as a service, security as a service. You can slice the network towards different customers or towards different applications. And you can go all the way up and start hosting stuff if you want to an IoT gateway, or looking at the mobile world, maybe some edge applications, maybe some DUs, CUs, or other value-added applications. I took the next slides to make it even a little bit more visible and try to stack up different service components. So, of course, we can all give some dark fiber or footprint or premises away. I kept it gray because no one really likes to do that. We can make it a little bit more complicated, or make a nice service out of it. We can give a managed dark fiber away, or we can give spectrum away. Just a piece of spectrum on some optical links or fiber to someone else, or of course active wavelengths is something all of us know. We can add to all of this synchronization or security, in this case on the optical layer, layer 1. We can make it more complicated, move a layer up, or 2 layers, 1.5 layers, layer 2, 3, move into switched and aggregated networks. Also here, provide an end-to-end service with synchronization and securities, and it would be adding PTP or layer 2, 3, MACsec, IPsec encryption. Slice that whole thing, have some SDN layer on top, maybe even look at TSN type of networks, time-sensitive networking, and if you want to go really crazy, you add edge compute, NFV as a service, maybe hosting, software as a service, and orchestration on top. So starting very simple, going up to a little bit more complicated stuff. You see the properties, which I think are the key properties, from bandwidth all the way up to subscription of software in different license scheme. What you then need to do, maybe measure throughput, as I said before, but in any case, you need to be able to SLA the whole thing, to demarc, to meter, and then maybe to automate. That's very important. Now, how can they be realized? Let me use the last part of it to show you how this can be realized. This is a little bit of product advertisement from myself, but from ADVA. But you can generalize it. Many of these solutions you probably get somewhere else if you don't want ours. But the dark fiber managed, you simply use some OTDR. You can put some fiber net of things on top. What we do with that is we use fiber sensors to do things like manhole access supervision, things where you don't have power, or whether water is running into something, and so on. So you can make a nice, simple service out of that. You can go up to spectrum, obviously, with optical line systems, where that is an access, DCIs moving up to the core, offering spectrum services. Then you can add something active, of course, from simple stuff to some very high-speed stuff, maybe 400 gig E's, maybe even go higher, 800 gig E's are being discussed for the future, and so on and so on. And on top, you can provide encryption or synchronization if needed by timing channels or by respective encryption formats and manage the whole thing. Now, going to layer 2, layer 3, it looks a little bit similar. Of course, you can put devices now in, which are then offering layer 2, 3 services. It can be cell-side gateways, NITs, CPEs, demarcation devices, aggregation devices. If you want to, you can disaggregate that further. A prominent example is the disaggregated NOS coming out of the disaggregated cell-side gateway activity from Facebook tip. You can put synchronization on top from the edge to the core, and also encryption again, and offer that as services. I'm more in this piece, and of course, manage it. Now, a little bit more complicated. Not many people going there yet, but some do. You can offer the next layer up by offering edge compute, just as pure resources, like storage and compute resources, or putting some, let me call it operating system on there, and then offering that operating system to host whatever applications from your customer, or even to host some of these applications. I used it before, so let me use it again. An IoT gateway could be such an application. So that's not that simple anymore, but doable, and there are people looking at that. Now, to summarize, I think what I try to tell you, of course, networking is essential. We all know that, and we like that. I think we need to start and charge for usage. If we don't do that yet, we need to find ways to do so. So that's a big learning out of this, and some people actually confirming that I'm talking to. Of course, we need to do more faster with less. That you might tell me that's probably has always been the case, but it just got accelerated, I think. Therefore, we need to accelerate the digitization and disaggregation of networks. I think wholesale setups will be essential. We can't wait years and years and years for something to be built out to get that connectivity to businesses, people, and services. And then the properties, you've seen me showing examples, they range from bandwidth to edge compute or software as a service. And you need to be able, of course, to SLA them, to measure them, well, at the end of the day, to meter them, to charge for them, to get money for them. So let me end positively. I see this as a huge opportunity for all of us, everybody who's in the networking industry. And once again, I talked to a politician, a German politician, who looked at us and looked at me and was saying, "You are system relevant." Wonderful to be called system relevant, which is great. So I think for once we are all in the right industry. Thanks with that. Thanks for listening, and maybe we have some questions.
Thank you, Christoph. I will give Marcello and Giordana the option to unmute themselves and give you the questions, if any.
Yes, thanks. So I do have one from Luca Cicchelli from Topics. He says, basically, with more service going to the edge, which is driven by low latency, how do you see exchanging traffic closer to the end user, Christoph?
I'm trying to understand exchanging traffic closer to the end user. Trying to interpret that correctly. Of course, we're moving closer to the edge. So let me start on a very high level, and maybe I answer it with that. We're moving closer to the edge. We're having some applications who are pushed more and more towards the end user in order to allow for that low latency. There's no other way. If you look at, for example, some mobile examples, and you look at the round trip times required, there is no other way than to go onto that aggregation node and do it there, or forget that requirement. You can't get to that latency, because we all know physics are physics and microseconds are microseconds if we transmit to some fibers. And if that is not allowed, then we need to be at a certain distance to that end user. Now, the question I'm asking often is, does it really have to be the case? Because it really complicates the service a lot, obviously, to be that near to. On one hand, you try to centralize because you try to make easier, you try to concentrate them and so on. On the other hand, if you distribute very complicated things very near to the new user, it's getting very expensive again. So the question of, how prominent are these services? How much revenue is in these services? Do we believe in these services? I see them, for example, in manufacturing for sure, in applications like that, but you might just solve that locally into that in that factory, in that manufacturing site. And there are others, obviously. So I think some of these will come, but we will be very careful to deploy them on a wider scale from my point of view, because it costs money.